In February of 1945, an epic confrontation took place on an 8-mile strip of land in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Iwo Jima. The only value of the island was its strategic airstrip located just 625 miles southeast of Tokyo. If taken, the outpost would be close enough to Japan for fighter escorts to accompany and protect Allied bombers on their missions. The date of this camera slate is just 5 days before these men would again have to battle the Japanese. Any diversion helped take their minds off the difficult task ahead. The capture of Iwo Jima was expected to take 10 days. It took 36. It was the bloodiest assault in the history of the U.S. Marines. On February 17th, the shelling began. The morning erupted into a firestorm of shells and rockets. A war correspondent on one of the ships wrote, "I can't help thinking nobody can live through this, but I know better." The shelling stopped as 120 carrier planes set off to strafe the island with napalm and gunfire. But this ferocious bombardment failed to roust the Japanese from their underground shelters throughout the island. On the morning of February 19th, 60,000 Marines boarded their landing craft for a 2-mile trip into the unknown. These men were mostly veterans of other Pacific struggles, and the only thing they knew for sure was that they would confront a very dangerous and very devious enemy. It was expected that 15,000 of these Marines would become casualties. As it turned out, that figure was conservative. On the ride in, some soldiers tried to master Japanese phrases. But small talk would be little help against an enemy willing to sacrifice his life for the Emperor. This is how it looked from inside the landing craft as the first waves hit the beach at Iwo Jima. The Marines' first great obstacle was the volcanic sand, so loose that American tanks could barely get a grip on the stuff to move inland. One exasperated private trying to dig a foxhole said, "It's like digging a hole in a barrel of wheat." By 5 p.m. that day, 30,000 Marines were on the shores of Iwo Jima. The first objective was Mount Suribachi. Inside the extinct volcano lurked 1,200 Japanese soldiers in a honeycomb of caves and bunkers waiting to mow down the approaching Marines. The Japanese plan was to allow the Americans to come ashore, move inland, then be butchered by mortar and machine gun fire from strategically located pillboxes. While the Marines were able to initially get off the beaches, many found themselves back there after being wounded inland. These Marine medics are prepping casualties for evacuation by sea and air. the quick responsiveness by medical personnel saved thousands of lives. The medics put their own lives in danger to help their wounded comrades. It was a rough ride out to the hospital ships, but once there, the odds of the soldiers surviving increased dramatically. This camera slate illustrates the fierce fighting. By 4 a.m. on the second day, this landing craft rescued 226 men. Hundreds of boats were performing the same mission. For these men, the war is over. At Iwo Jima, the Japanese Air Force continued a new tactic first used in the Philippines, the kamikaze or suicide bomber. The pilot was a human bomb. The kamikaze attacks at Iwo Jima inflicted more than 300 casualties to the sailors supporting the Marines on shore. The Marines tried to flush out the Japanese with their mortars and artillery. They were mostly unsuccessful. The only way to attack the entrenched Japanese positions was from up close. As the Marines cautiously climbed the flanks of Suribachi, they could actually hear the Japanese talking inside the volcano. For the next 4 days, those Japanese voices would be systematically silenced by flamethrowers and hand grenades. There seemed no end to the Japanese resistance, and the Leathernecks desperately needed a lift. On February 23rd, one group of tenacious Marines finally made it up the north face of Mount Suribachi. They climbed this hunk of volcanic rock in a stunning moment, perhaps the best remembered image of World War II. By the sixth day of battle, the Marines had captured the island's largest airstrip. American bombers could now reach Japan, escorted by fighters. There was some hope that conquering the rest of the island would not be as difficult as the first days had been. That hope was short-lived. To clear out the northern end of the island, Marines had to traverse rocky terrain embedded with Japanese snipers and mortars. And the Japanese, as usual, fought to the death. In 1 hour, 94 Marines were killed trying to cross a space of 100 yards in front of one cave. When the Marines couldn't coax them out or shoot them out, they burned them out. "10,000 gallons of flamethrower oil were used up during each day of battle. This is the true face of war from a camera that never lies." Finally, after 36 days of intense fighting, the remaining Japanese surrendered. Of the 22,000 Japanese that originally occupied Iwo, only 1,000 survived. 21,000 had fought to their deaths. These men chose to live. The taking of the island cost more than 5,000 American lives, but the U.S. Marines had won the fiercest battle of their history. Of the bloody struggle, Admiral Chester Nimitz said, On Iwo Island, uncommon valor was a common virtue.